And we are live. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. I'm one of your co-hosts, Blake Ruffino. Alongside me is my counterpart and co-host, Joe DeLeone. Good evening, good sir. How are you?
I'm doing pretty good, Blake. I'm very excited to get into our debates today because I think that our power rankings arguments are going to be some of the fiercest that we've had so far this season. Because after what happened last week, and I don't think enough people are realizing this, there is so much volatility, and there frankly aren't a lot of right answers on who the second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, eighth best teams are in college football right now. I think that you can shuffle around any of those teams and you can make a compelling argument.
I've been waiting all week for today. And the reason that I've been waiting all week for today is very, very, very simple. For the last month, I've been taking a beating about Blake doesn't have Miami at number one. Oh, only for them to piss down their leg versus Louisville.
All right. We say this all the time, and you talk about this all the time, how losing a game no longer matters as much as it did previously. So they lost one game. It's like the equivalent of the Eagles lost on Thursday Night Football to the Giants. Do we really think that the Eagles aren't going to go on a run in the playoffs?
I don't think that this is the NFL.
I think it's more NFL than it's ever been. I think that you don't need to go perfect and go completely unscathed.
Again, I think that that's also a little bit of right now-isms when, again, Nick Saban only had one team that won a national title with a loss. Without a loss. There's been a lot of losing that's happened. The teams have lost and teams have had one loss. But I'm not there yet.
I think that we are more in that area though, where
we haven't expanded playoff and
we haven't expanded. Okay, but outside of that, though, the teams are a lot more balanced. We don't live in a world where there were 5-6 teams that had the most elite rosters, and some of them fell short, and then 2 or 3 or so would end up pushing themselves above the pack. We now live in a world where they're mostly balanced. More teams can knock each other off. And at the end of the day, if you have 1 or 2 losses, you still get to go on a playoff.
I had this debate with Tim Brando of all people, and he told me that I was a, quote, idiot because I said that I just asked him a question, and I said, okay, you say there's more parity. Okay, I can see where you're coming from there. Can you explain that 4 Blue Bloods made the playoff in the Final Four last year?
I don't. I think that applied last year, but I think that this year
it's applied.
We're going to see.
I think it's almost applied every year.
Well, the current version of the changed college football world that we have hasn't really been around for very long. We've got 1 year of the 12-team college football playoff.
But who's been the Final Four the last 5 years?
The only mostly Blue Bloods. It wasn't going to be overnight transformation that new teams were going to come into the mix.
You keep telling me about parity. It's a half a decade of parity, and the Final Four teams continue to be the Final Four teams. Yes, it is 2021.
But that's my whole Blake. But that's my whole point, though, is that we're not going to have just an immediate 2021 hits and then suddenly teams are unexpectedly good. That's why we're seeing a program like Indiana. Everything is flowing and clicking correctly, and why we really could see a Vanderbilt or a Missouri that ends up making it into the Final 8 or maybe even the Final 4. I just think that we don't have enough time to have established evidence
Neither one of those teams
parity doesn't exist.
Neither one of those teams are making it to the Final 4, but
Indiana will.
You said Missouri and Vanderbilt.
I know. It was mostly just throwing out there.
But nevertheless, we are going to have these debate on our power rankings. We will get to Week 9's power rankings here short enough. Week 9 picks. We'll also get to the Week 9, the biggest games of Week 9. We'll get to those as well. And we'll also talk about Illinois and Washington. We'll break that game down here tonight as well. Before we get rolling, everybody do us a favor, though. Hit the like and share. Share to all those groups if you're on Facebook and to all those social media pages. You're watching us, listening to us on YouTube. Like, subscribe, notification bell, wherever you listen to podcasts. Rate, review, and subscribe. Also, every Ruffino and Joe show is brought to you by our good friends over at FanDuel. We have partnered this football season with our good friends over at FanDuel. Do us a favor. Download the FanDuel Sportsbook app. You got the discretionary income. Want to play some bets, parlays, future picks. The best place to do that is with our good friends over at FanDuel. If you have any thoughts, questions, concerns, go over to FanDuel.com/RG for more details and reference to that. All right, Joe, we do have a super chat in here before we get rolling. As always, Royce Pierce with a $20 super chat says, hope you guys had a great day. Keep kicking,
Royce.
Bro. Yeah, I've had an okay day. It hasn't been too bad. What about you?
A little bit chaotic. I can't say why. I can't explain why I'm not cleared to, but I was supposed to go to Nashville for something, and then that flight got canceled. That whole trip I had booked in 2 hours got canceled. I'm not gonna do that. They were very gracious, the people that were gonna fly me to Nashville, but that was really weird. It was a very weird 4 hours.
It would have been a banger. You could have.
I wanted barbecue. I posted about it. I was like, oh, this is sick. I get to go try. I've never been to Nashville before.
Could have, done your flight at 7 p.m. and stayed around for Missouri and Vanderbilt. You could have gone to the game.
I wouldn't have gone to the game. I was gonna fly back Saturday morning so I could sit and watch everything. I don't like the thought of going to a game unless I could get in the press box or something like that, because it's hard to keep track of everything when you're sitting in the stadium.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's impossible. Tell me about it. I'm with you there. I'm with you, but it's all good. Nashville's a really great town to go to this time of year. Weather changing the way that it is. All right, everybody, do us a favor: hit the like and share, to all those groups, to all those social media pages. You're watching us, listening to us on YouTube. Like, subscribe, notification bell wherever you listen to podcasts. Rate, review, and subscribe. Joe, week 9 is here, and that means it's Wednesday, so that means that we're going to go through our power rankings here. Let's go through your top 12. Who are in your top 12 this week in week 9 in your power rankings?
At number 1, shocker, Ohio State. By the way, really quickly, I have to address from last week. I made a very stupid mistake, and I didn't realize it until after the show. I accidentally I was supposed to change the text on the template, and I forgot to put Oregon where I had Tennessee last week. So that was a complete error that I had. I did not mean to leave Oregon out, so I just want to clarify that. But at number 2, I have Indiana. Number 3, Alabama. Number 4, Oregon. 5, Texas A&M. 6, Georgia. 7, Oklahoma. 8, Miami. 9, Notre Dame. 10, Missouri. 11, Georgia Tech. 12, Ole Miss.
Before we get moving here are my top 12 for week 9. I have Ohio State at number 1, Bama at number 2, Indiana at 3, A&M at 4, Georgia at 5, Oregon at 6, Miami at 7, Ole Miss at 8, Oklahoma at 9, Notre Dame at 10, Mizzou at 11, and Vanderbilt at 12. And what's ironic, if you're going based off of mine, 8 and 9 play and 11 and 12 play this week. So 2 of those teams are going to get their second loss here. But let's start off with this. Joe, I have Indiana at number 3. You have them at number 2. I have Alabama ahead of Indiana. You have Indiana ahead of Alabama. When you're separating those 2 teams, why do you have Indiana ahead of the University of Alabama?
Look, I've been a very big supporter of the surge that Alabama has had recently. I think that there are a lot of reasons to buy into them as the sole SEC team that makes the most sense to actually compete for a national title. I think all these other teams are good, but none of them are realistic shots to actually win the college football playoff this year. But when we're comparing them and Indiana, when we're making this adjustment after the losses of last week, I have to stick with Indiana. We dug into Indiana a little bit more after the Oregon victory, and then when we were previewing UCLA this week, the more I watch of them, the more that I see of them, the more that I really feel I have enough evidence to prove that they are so different than last year, that they are a legitimate dominant team. They're built like a top Big Ten team should be, which is physical up front on both sides of the football. They've got so much talent at linebacker, in their secondary, at wide receiver. They're built the right way to have sustained success. And I'm not saying that Alabama doesn't. The issues that I have with Alabama is that they have had instances of inconsistency throughout the year despite playing so well. Run game, not showing up. It's happened multiple times over the past couple of weeks. I have a fear that even if Jam Miller does play, but if he's out, what happens to this team when they try to run the football, when they're challenged by a team like Ohio State or like Indiana or even like Oregon? Are they going to be able to win without a run game when they're facing off against a team that has a much tougher defense and a much better secondary than the teams that they have currently faced.
Well, okay. Let's just say this. I get what you're saying about Indiana. They had a really good game and a really good showing versus Oregon. Mendoza did have a pick six in that game and did have some situations where he threw some passes that I think that maybe a more experienced, I didn't say better, a more experienced team might have picked that off. The only ranked team to this moment that Indiana has played, they had 111 rushing yards against Oregon. I'm not saying it's bad. I'm not saying it's good, but you had 111. The yards per play that you had was 4.8. Blake, it's on the road against a really hostile team. I get it. You went 5-4 on third down, and you went 0 for 1 on fourth down. You were 33% on conversion downs. I say all that to say this. You're going to talk about, Blake, I don't do this for resume, and I'm not talking about resume here. However, you're right about Alabama not being able to run the football. I do think, for what it's worth, that if they lose again, at some point this is going to catch up for them. But what did I see on the 4 straight ranked opponents that they've played? When Jam Miller came back, the run game got moving. And I also saw Indiana also get limited in some situations offensively against an Oregon team. Oregon's a very good football team. So to say that just because Indiana came away with the win doesn't mean that they didn't also have struggles against a really good opponent. Honestly, the only really good opponent that they had. You couldn't convert on third down. You had issues throwing the ball on third down. Mendoza throws a very critical pick six. They have problems too. When I look at Alabama, the last month, they've been challenged more than anybody, and that run game has still been an issue, and they keep finding ways to win. Now, the problem is with Alabama is people are going to say, but they lost to Florida State. You're right. They did.
I'm not using that as any evidence.
I didn't mean you.
No,
but
I know. I just wanted to.
In the comments, people are going to say, well, what happens if okay, you had a first-time quarterback with a first-time OC that in their first game together on the road. I give them a mulligan.
It's a completely different team, which is why I don't think that's sound evidence. I think it's lazy evidence for anyone who would try to use that.
For the first time in college football in the regular season since 2001, Nick Saban, no one has gone a straight month playing ranked opponents and gone undefeated. It hasn't happened. I'm not saying Indiana hasn't been tested. I'm not saying that the big win versus Oregon isn't massive. I'm not saying that they're not a good team. I have them at 3. What I'm saying is Alabama, to some extent, their excuse was they had a hand tied behind their back. And when I go back and watch Indiana and Oregon today, and I'm like, all right, Mendoza he wasn't great here. I look at Bama's secondary and say, I don't know if they're not better. And by the way, statistically, they are better than Oregon's. I get to a situation where if we're fighting over semantics, I feel like that I know more about Alabama right now because they've been tested more.
Okay.
And I would lean, if you told me who I thought the better team was right now, here's how I quantify it. I'm taking Ty Simpson over Fernando Mendoza.
Okay, so I disagree with that. I think that they're even.
You're going to take Fernando Mendoza over Ty Simpson after what Ty Simpson.
But I don't think that that's what the conversation is, because when we say I take one player over the other, it automatically implies that I think it's a no-brainer. I think that both quarterbacks could step into this game, and either one of them could play better than the other. I don't think that either player has shown separation between the two. And frankly, it's going to be a very exciting debate for the upcoming draft for which guy is going to be the first overall pick. But I don't think it's a no-brainer between the two of them. Fernando Mendoza has been
Did I say it's tremendous. A no-brainer?
You didn't say it's no-brainer, but if you ask the question, which quarterback am I taking? And if you have an immediate answer that implies that the other guy is automatically taken out of the conversation.
But no, that's not.
Here is my issue, though, with what you're talking about, how they've been tested. Yes, they've played ranked teams. I think some of the teams that they've played that are ranked are a little bit inflated, particularly Tennessee. And I also think that Vanderbilt is overrated, which I'm going to keep saying. But here's the biggest part with all this. Ty Simpson has faced off against really bad secondaries that he has been enabled to play really well against. I am not saying that makes everything that he's done completely thrown out the window, but Fernando Mendoza's worst game came against Oregon. Every other game since then, he's smoked all the other teams that he's gone up against.
But
he's
you
had
can't
no
do
real
that.
issues.
If you're going to do the resume thing,
I'm not doing the resume thing. I'm talking about
everybody else he played.
No,
Well,
I'm talking about the secondaries that he's seen and that he's gone up against.
Ty
Simpson
Simpson
is
15 in passing yards allowed.
Their we talked about in the preview how their corners are bad. What do you? We literally talked about this.
Okay, I might agree with you, but statistically speaking, Missouri's top 15 in passing yards allowed.
Also, if you want to bring resume into this, Indiana is second in strength of record. Alabama is fourth.
Joe, you can now do strength of schedule. The number one team in strength of schedule right now is Alabama.
I think that strength of record means more. No, I'm not pulling it up. I think strength of record means more than strength of schedule.
They literally played two teams in your top.
Oh, wait.
Actually, they played three. Bama played three teams in your top 12 and beat all of them.
Alabama is number 2 in strength of schedule.
Okay, they're number 2. Where's Indiana? Yeah, go down to the 90s because that's where they're going to be.
They're 30th. I think strength of record is a more applicable metric when we're having these conversations.
Because Joe, if we're going to
Indiana has a better win than Alabama does, but this is why we don't do the resume debate.
They might have a better win. They don't have better wins. Sorry, they don't. Nobody's been tested in the country more than they have. You can't say that they have.
Sure.
Because quite frankly, over those 3 games, they went on the road to Georgia, they went on the road to Missouri, and then they had Vanderbilt at home. Okay. With all due respect, Indiana's not remotely close when you're playing Dookie Water State and Rudy Poo Tech. Don't you dare come in that. And here's another question. Let me ask you this. How do you know how Indiana responds week after week after week after week when they're having to play tougher opponents? When they don't
stop with the hypotheticals. I'm tired of this. I'm tired of doing the if Indiana had Alabama's schedule, what would they do? I hate it when you do this.
We're literally talking about a hypothetical.
I get that. We're comparing 2 teams, but you're creating a hypothetical non-existent scenario.
You're literally saying in a hypothetical between Indiana and Alabama that you don't want me to
that's a possible matchup. We're debating the 2 teams because they're compared to one another and because they could play each other.
In a hypothetical matchup, I have to go based off of what I've seen.
No. There is a wait. Okay, but I'm saying that I don't like that you just tried to say that, what if Alabama or what if Indiana had Alabama's schedule?
I asked you, it's a question I'm asking you. Do you know what Indiana does every single week if they play? No. You know why you don't like it? Because you can't answer it. The reason you don't want to talk about that is because you can't answer the question.
No, I can't answer the question. It's an irrelevant talking point because Indiana doesn't have to do what Alabama just did. And I've said this 100 times. The SEC schedule and the SEC rankings are inflated for the 100th time. They get ranked way higher than teams in other conferences.
With all due respect, it's not inflated when you literally get to play against teams that literally don't have a pulse.
Michigan and USC and Washington have similar resumes as these teams that are up in the top 15.
And Michigan went on the road into Oklahoma and lost and got their shit pushed in.
Michigan should be higher ranked than Tennessee. USC should be higher ranked than Tennessee. Washington should be higher ranked than Tennessee. All of those teams are better than Tennessee. Yet Tennessee, I
didn't bring up Tennessee.
I know, but I'm trying to point out that there is an inflation in the ranking of SEC teams. Let's not argue about this.
Then there's an inflation with Notre Dame.
There's no inflation with Notre Dame. They have one of the hardest schedules out of any team that we've talked about.
Tennessee's losses come to 2 teams in your top 5.
Okay.
Do Tennessee's losses come to teams in your top 5?
Did Tennessee's – we're not debating this. Can we get back to the conversation we were just having? No, I can't answer the question. I'm not going to allow us to keep getting distracted because we were having a conversation comparing the 2 teams that we were talking about. The 2 teams that we were talking about were Alabama and Indiana. My question to you that I think is a very fair question. Do you think that Indiana has a glaring weakness that could hold them back like Alabama does.
Yes,
because I think I think Alabama has two. I think that they've got a run game that sometimes does not show up. And if they were playing teams with better secondaries, it would lead to bigger issues. And secondly, I think that their pass rush has improved, but I don't have enough long-term evidence that their pass rush is going to have sustained success.
You know how I don't know all of Indiana's weaknesses?
I swear to God, if you say because they haven't played anybody, I'm going to lose
Because they
my
haven't
mind.
challenged themselves like the University of Alabama. You played one ranked opponent and you couldn't run the ball either. I mean, I have Alabama running the ball for over 100 yards against the teams that they play too.
Can Indiana just not be allowed to do anything right? That they're always, no matter what they do, they're always going to be referred to as not having been challenged? Is that how this works?
Kurt Cignetti ran his ass out there in the beginning and said, I'm going to do what the SEC does and not challenge myself. And then you were mad because I said a team that hasn't done something since 2001, yes, they're going to show weaknesses when they play ranked opponents. They're going to. And then the one time that Indiana goes up against a ranked opponent, you also have a struggle of running the football. You ran 19 times with your lead back, and he didn't even get over 4 yards a carry. He was at 4 yards a carry specifically.
They went up against one of the best run defenses in college football. They still finished that game with 111 rushing yards.
And Vanderbilt, even we look at the logo of Vanderbilt and say that their run defense isn't top 15 because they're in the top 15 right now too. And nope, go look it up, please.
No, I'm not looking at that. I've never, like, I don't think that really applies to what we're talking about here. They didn't have trouble.
It's one of the best run defenses in the country. And I say, well, statistically speaking, they've gone up against 3. You said the same thing about Missouri. Oh, man, this Missouri front seven.
Rushing attacks. What rushing attacks has Vanderbilt gone up against that's like really been a test for them? This is arguments.
Name,
really devolving.
Okay. And also name Indiana's.
They couldn't run the ball. What do you mean?
You keep telling me that I can't use resume.
Iowa has a great run game.
You literally just came in here and said that I can't use resume and say name a team that Vandy's done it against.
When I bring these things up that has nothing to do with resume, it's merely pointing out that the stats are no. I'm trying to point out that sometimes not every stat is true. Not every stat is true. Just because a team statistically is doing well in run defense, if they're beating up on LSU, of course that they're going to look, their run defensive stats are going to look good. Blake, they couldn't run the ball against Tennessee. That is where I have issue. They have struggled in other spurts.
2 freshman running backs. Sure, when Jan Miller's out, they're going to struggle with 2 freshman running backs. Sure.
Jan Miller played against Tennessee, though.
But he's coming out of the concussion, and he literally doesn't play in the second half.
I don't think that it's unfair to say that Alabama's run game, their inconsistency and their pass rush inconsistency is not a concern. And I think that it's unfair to just automatically jump to Indiana hasn't played anybody as the counter evidence. I don't think that's fair.
No, that's not my argument. My argument is that if you go through a month against ranked opponents, your weaknesses are going to be more glaring than when teams don't get faced against that every week. And it's going to be. Without a shadow of a doubt, when you play tougher opponents, your weaknesses are going to constantly be shown. And Ty Simpson constantly overcomes it. And quite frankly, I got to be real with you. I think this Bama secondary is better than Oregon's. And I think they give Fernando Mendoza a lot of problems. A lot of problems. You're talking about a top 5 DB room right now that, quite frankly, has been able to beat up on everybody and every quarterback that they've played. I do think they're better.
I am checking. I'm just
Jalen DeBoer, if you embarrass me moving forward, I swear to God.
I know. Alabama's 32nd in EPA per dropback allowed. And where is Oregon in that conversation? Oregon is 8th. So there's this difference between those secondaries. I do think that Alabama's secondary has talent, but one defense has been a lot more efficient. Secondly, I don't disagree with your point. I don't want to linger on this because I want to get to the next debate that we have.
And Alabama in passing yards allowed is top 10. So if we're going to pull out stats, You want to know what Oregon's
But,
is?
okay, but just
10.
pure yardage of what they allowed. This is why I like using EPAs.
Yards mean
Wait.
EPA per pass comes from passing yards allowed.
No, it's a little bit more expected points allowed is a lot more nuanced than that. And I'm not going to sit here and try to explain what expected points allowed are because it would just be a boring ass conversation for anybody who's listening. There's a reason why I use them, because sometimes those numbers of how many yards you've given up are not totally clear, because you could go against a team that doesn't throw the ball that much. You could face off with a team that you dominate time of possession.
Like Indiana. Name a team not named Oregon that they can do that against.
Blake, what I was trying to say a second ago is that you pointed out that they've faced a harder schedule and therefore their issues are going to stand out more. While I agree with that premise, I think that the context of who they've gone up against, very specifically them having issues in those matchups, is concerning because of what they were going up against. They were going up against teams where their pass rush should have been better. Their run game should have been better. I'm not saying that I'm out on Alabama. I'm not saying that I think Alabama is cooked, that they're not. Okay. I'm merely stating that I have more consistent dominance on the field and statistically from Indiana. And Alabama has been tremendous, but they have had a couple of issues.
And all I'm saying is, when you talk about consistent dominance, I'm asking you who that dominance is against. Because you didn't dominate Oregon.
I don't know what to say to because we're having the same circular argument. Let's talk about the next two.
Why in the good blue hell do you have a team in Georgia below Oregon?
Blake, them not having a pass rush is a real problem. I like this Georgia team, and I really, really, really think that this Georgia team has the ability to get to an SEC title, and I really think that they have an ability to accomplish that by just outscoring teams. And by the sheer fact that their secondary has some talented defensive backs like they did against Ole Miss, that late in games they can make a couple of plays in a shootout and win. It is going to be really stressful for Georgia fans. But there's a path to success there. If we're comparing teams, though, and we're ranking them, like they had 0 sacks against Ole Miss. They can't get pressure without manufacturing it. Guys that are getting sack production for them are linebackers. They have the blitz. They can't get home with 4. That's a problem for a Georgia team. And I think it's even bigger problem that we haven't even talked about this. They're a team schematically on defense that has historically succeeded off of not having to send pressure that they could rush for. And I don't think that Schumann knows how to adjust. And I'm not trying to call him inept and a bad defensive coordinator. He's a tremendous defensive coordinator. I think he's out of his element because they didn't expect this to happen. And they don't know how to end up adjusting in order to produce those pressures in order to play better defensively. They have good players, man. They're just not getting the job done. I have pause, and I'm a little bit worried, and the Ole Miss game gave me that worry.
What has Oregon done against teams that can match their talent level? What have they done?
Can you be a little more specific on what teams
Penn State going into double overtime in Indiana. What have they done?
They've played those teams close, but they have made the necessary clutch plays late in those games to win.
No, they haven't. They lost to Indiana. They didn't make the clutch plays.
They did against Penn State,
which is a 3-3 football team at the current moment. Georgia has one thing that I don't think anybody else in the country can say at the current moment. They have a loss where they couldn't come back, but they have 2 games where they were completely dead in the water, and their quarterback led them back to win. They do have flaws. They have massive flaws getting after the quarterback. There's no doubt about it. It's going to bite them in the ass. If they play Ohio State, quite frankly, if they played Indiana, I think it does bite them. I don't think it bites them against Oregon. Because quite frankly, I got to be real with you. One thing I know about Georgia is they're going to line up that rock and they're going to run right at you, and there's nothing that you're going to really do about it. If they are not inept defensively and they're able to get some stops here and there, Joe, this Georgia offense has been pretty damn good. It doesn't look good on paper, and people don't want to talk about it because they run the football a lot. They get tight ends involved, and they're not sexy. They're in a huddle. They're getting out of a huddle. They're going to a line of scrimmage in 12 personnel, and they're running it right down your throat. Ask Ole Miss. There's no way that I'm taking Oregon over Georgia on a neutral field today.
I disagree.
Because I think Gunnar Stockton is outplaying Dante Moore at the current moment. I think Dante Moore is a better prospect. Don't get what I'm saying twisted. He's outplaying him at the current moment. And I think when we talk about some of these very minute details, these very finite details, I look at Oregon and say, man, yes, you got a lot of talent, but man, you're young on offense. Joe, they're having to rotate freshman running backs in there. Their best wide receiver right now is DK Moore, who is a very talented and going to be a great player. I don't know if you're going to be able to overcome what Georgia can throw at you defensively, to be honest with you, because if Penn State can do it and lock you down in moments, why can't Georgia?
I disagree with that because I think that Oregon's defense has the talent, and they have talent that is.
No, I'm talking about their offense.
Wait. I'm responding to both things. I think that they have shown in their two close games, even though they lost to Indiana and in the win that they had against Penn State, that their defense is fast and physical and they can make some really big plays. And I think on the other side of things, I think that their offense, despite its youth, has also shown a lot of explosiveness. The thing with Georgia, Blake, is that they have been very inconsistent this year. As much as I agree with you about Gunnar Stockton, I think that Gunnar Stockton is one of the most overly criticized quarterbacks for absolutely no reason in college football. I see the kid make nothing but clutch plays and put his body on the line to help his team win. But the problem that I have talking about them is that since the Alabama game and in the Alabama game, they have not been consistent on offense. They couldn't finish drives against Alabama. Against Auburn,
5 points.
Alabama, they only scored 21.
No, you said after Alabama, they haven't been consistent.
No.
Points.
No. Let me finish what I'm saying.
Okay.
They couldn't finish drives against Alabama. Auburn, they couldn't score for most of the first half, and then suddenly in the second half, that was when they were able to produce, and they were having trouble running the football. Georgia, yeah, they had a tremendous game. That was more of an example of, Ole Miss was more of an example of what we knew that they were capable of doing. They ran the ball well. There were a lot of big plays from Gunnar Stockton through the air. He was 26-31 passing, all of those things. That is the inconsistency, though, is that we go from a team looking like they can't run the ball, they can't move the ball through the air when they're challenged by a somewhat solid defense, and then the minutes that they get the chance to play a ass secondary like Ole Miss is, of course they tear them apart. Or not ass secondary, is more of their run game, but of course they were able to tear them apart in that game because Ole Miss's defense is not very good. Look, fine. If you want to keep leaning on Oregon doesn't have a lot of impressive battles with good teams that they've looked really dominant in, I get it. But when we're just comparing the consistency measure of this, I see issues with Georgia's offense at times, and they don't have a pass rush. And I don't know if that's something that's going to not hurt them in the playoffs.
I don't like the consistency thing because the two teams that I saw that talent-wise can do something, they go in double overtime does Oregon, and they lose the other. At least Georgia's 2-1 in the games where they got challenged the most. Actually, 3-1 in the games that they got challenged the most. I think that Auburn defense is legit. I don't think that's an indictment at all.
I don't think that it is, but at the same time, if your offense is supposed to be so elite, you should be able to overcome.
And Oregon's is
a team like that.
And
I think Oregon still has the top defense. Or are you talking about their offense? What do you mean by Oregon's is?
Oregon's offense is dominant. I mean, cute. You were able to do it against Oklahoma State. Sounds great. You go up against the two most talented teams and you lose one, and you go up against a 3-loss Penn State team. They also can't move the football.
They could move the football against Penn State, and they did produce enough big plays to win that game and to win it in overtime. I don't think that
move the football is what I'm saying, and they couldn't move it against UCLA.
Penn State. Okay, now we're starting to run down the string. I'm just
saying, how can you look at Oregon and say, all right, I've seen them go against two opponents, and they kind of looked really sloppy. I've seen
I don't
Georgia.
think it's sloppy, though. I think this is just tough games.
You lost, and you went into double overtime with a 3-loss team. Yes, that's called sloppiness. I look at Georgia and say, okay, you lost one of the teams against one of the games against Alabama that we both have at either 2 or 3, and then you go on the road to Tennessee, and then you got Ole Miss, and you're able to win games against opponents that are better than Penn State.
Is what Georgia did not sloppy, though?
No, but they're winning. And they're going up against better opponents when they do it.
Okay, like how tough
They're
of
finding ways to win.
How tough of an opponent is Kentucky and Auburn in that span?
Oh, I don't know. Ask
and wait, hold on. And we're also
ask A&M, who also couldn't score on Auburn.
This Auburn team doesn't have a win in the SEC. Every SEC team can't be good. Every SEC team can't be good.
I didn't say that they're good. I didn't say that they're good. But you're talking about Georgia offensively not moving the ball. John Mateer couldn't do it. Marcel Reed in the most explosive offense in the SEC couldn't do it. This Auburn defense is legit. So if you're going to talk about, the Auburn game and them going into Jordan Hare, you know what else? Oregon couldn't go into Happy Valley and then beat them in regulation on a 3-loss team.
Penn State defense is equally as talented, if not more talented, than Auburn's. Their struggles have been more related to their record quitting.
They have the same record.
Penn State would if Drew Aller hadn't gotten hurt, Penn State beats Auburn.
I don't give a shit if he would. No, you know how you can't make that statement? Because you had a winless UCLA team that you went on the road and got your shit pushed in on.
But again, you could sit here and agree with me here that Penn State's problems have been the result of that team quitting and has nothing to do with the talent on that team. The defense
quit on
at home
and you're going to double overtime
is equivalent, if actually is better than the Auburn defense.
End of argument. Dan Lanning has been taught everything by Kirby, and Kirby gets his ass. Where Kirby can't beat Bama, Oregon can't beat Georgia. End of conversation.
I don't agree with that. I don't think that just simply ends
it's literal science.
It's not science. I just think that we have to continuously reframe the context of what a team has done. I like the Georgia team, man. I do. But why am I suddenly buying in after the Tennessee game, after Tennessee's shown troubles? Why am I buying in after the Ole Miss game?
Why are you buying in against Why are you buying in against Notre Dame when they have 2 losses against top 10 opponents too?
We're not talking about Notre Dame. We're not talking about Notre Dame.
You do that, you pick one specific SEC team and you say,
no, I don't.
You literally have done it 3 times. You said the same thing.
We're talking about SEC teams. We're talking about them. I have to.
Then do somebody else. Then do somebody in reference to why is your buy-in for Notre Dame here then?
The buy-in for Notre Dame.
Here we go.
Wait. And again, this has nothing to do with the conversation that we were just having. Notre Dame's performance, and by the way, I don't like that you're trying to make me come out like I'm a homer in this situation because you're asking me to
okay. I'll give you another team. You ready?
Give me a different team.
Defend Miami right now.
Miami played a bad game. So have a lot of the other teams in the schedule. Wait. Let me finish. Can you let me finish?
Yeah, sorry.
You have Alabama playing a bad game in week 1, and they're allowed to move on. Georgia plays a bad game against Alabama. They're allowed to move on. Oklahoma plays a bad game against Texas. They're allowed to move on. All these other teams are allowed to move on, and Louisville was underranked. They were underappreciated, a team that I had gotten wrong going into that matchup. They will probably finish the season ranked and in the ACC championship hunt.
So how does their loss not matter because Louisville was underranked?
Didn't say that the loss doesn't matter. Didn't say that the loss doesn't matter.
And then Tennessee loses to 2 of yours, 2 top 6 teams, and you don't want to justify them, but you'll justify Louisville and Miami's losses. Do you see where I'm going with this?
Wait. Say that it's – I don't know how you can compare – you're comparing Tennessee to Miami?
Tennessee lost 2 games to 2 of your 6 ranked opponents, top 6. They lost to both of those games to teams in your top 6. Miami, who, by the way, had 97 rushing yards versus Florida State and 63 versus Louisville. And we're supposed to say, oh, well, they don't have flaws because they only have one loss.
Blake, wait, to the Tennessee-Miami comment that you made, that one is not applicable in my eyes because I have every single game this year. Tennessee's
no, but when you're calling a team overrated, when you're calling them overrated,
Tennessee's overrated. They should not be ranked where they are.
Lost to two teams.
No, I literally just said their defense has been butt cheeks the whole season. They've been
and I got to be honest. And I got to be honest with you. You know what the most
every offense they've gone up against.
You know what else? Carson Beck has 6 interceptions the last 3 games that he's played.
Yeah, he's played poorly, but
he's
the rest of that
key.
team,
no, you got a bad secondary.
Some of the best position groups of college football.
It's going to throw 6 picks in 3 weeks.
But I at least have performances where Carson Beck has played well, and there's a version of him that is a solid quarterback. And we know that if he's not freaking out and trying to do everything and be Superman, he can play within the system.
When have we seen him?
Wait. More importantly, every single position group on that roster, arguably for Miami, is in the top 10. They have a top 10 secondary. They have a top 10 linebacker unit. They have a top 10 defensive line, top 10 offensive line, top 10 running back room, top 10 receiver room.
Pause. No, they don't.
And what position group?
Miami does not have a top 10 offensive line right now. Can I tell you why?
I completely disagree with that.
Okay, well, then the stats aren't proving it out.
What have they?
Because you've given up 5 sacks in the last 2 games that you played, and you couldn't get over 100 rushing yards. The best offensive line or a top 10 offensive line gets pushed versus a Florida State team that's got no pulse. 0 pulse. Don't you dare come at me and tell me
they completely loaded the box. They completely loaded the box against
Louisville.
Carson, but
Louisville did not.
That's how football works. That's how football works. Is that you have to wait. When a team tries to counter your biggest strength, you have to provide a second move. And their second move against Florida State was that Carson Beck played well and Malachi Toney played great. The problem was against Louisville. Louisville did the same exact thing, but Beck,
they're not walking guys
like shit.
Carson Beck can't be throwing into triple coverage with 7 and 8 guys dropping back in coverage.
It's not excusable. It's not excusable. It's absolutely not excusable.
I have 2 teams that you couldn't line up and run the ball on. That, quite frankly, you should be able to line up if you're a top 10 unit, which everybody said it was the best offensive line in the country. Right now, no, you're not.
I don't agree with that. I think that
you don't agree with them having 97 yards versus Florida State and 63 versus Louisville, because those aren't opinions; those are facts.
There's context for why those things happen, Blake. Of course, those numbers apply.
Yards per game the last 3 weeks.
Teams are desperate to stop their run game. They're incredibly desperate to stop their run game. They're having success. Yes,
mathematically, when you have a telecast that is showing a quarterback throwing into coverage with 8 guys in coverage, mathematically, that is impossible that teams are lining up in the box trying to stop the run game. It's not possible.
What play are you talking about that there were 8 guys in coverage? Are you talking about in the final drive?
No, I'm talking about when he threw into triple coverage and he got hit and the ball got picked and they threw a flag. I'm talking about him throwing into double coverage on a double move. Like, those are things where they literally have a telecast and an end zone copy where 8 guys are in coverage.
But Blake, just because those plays, that's how a defensive game plan works. You load the box early on in the sequence of a game. You bait an opposing team to throwing the ball and taking shots, and then you time when you make adjustments off of it. So, God forbid, Louisville played a really good game plan. God forbid, my whole point with this, and I don't give a shit if people want to give me a hard time for defending Miami. I don't care. Teams are allowed to have hiccups in the current version of college football.
But it's not a hiccup when in the last 3 weeks you're averaging 75 yards rushing. It's not a hiccup. It might be a fact. The last time you told me about something Miami related was last season, and I told you that secondary was cheeks. I'm going to give you – I think that interior offensive line has got a little bit of issues, and it starts at center, to be honest with you. I think teams – Joe, why has Louisville got 2 one-techs? That's unheard of. Unless you're attacking the center, You're not doing that. Teams are telling you that. Florida State is telling you that.
I just find it a little bit
a problem
unfair.
in the interior of that offensive line that you better get fixed now.
Okay, I find it a little bit unfair, and this is what stems from my frustration about conversations.
Shit. 46 minutes into this. Oh shit.
We might not be doing this Washington
Okay.
Illinois preview. We're past it.
right,
We're not getting to that. We got to get to game picks. We're not getting to that.
Good
we're gonna have 3 segments to pull from this. Blake, my problem is with the framing of the conversation with Miami and why I was overall frustrated with the way that everybody, the minute that they played poorly and the minute that they lost, that everybody was piling on. The way that they didn't finish well in the second half against Florida State, everybody just immediately started piling on. This Miami team sucks. They're overrated. They should not have been where they were. Anybody who hyped them up was a moron. It pisses me off because we've got other teams in the Big Ten and in the SEC that have had plenty of excuse making from people that have been willing to support them. I keep hearing people make arguments for Illinois. Oh, well, their 2 losses are to the top 2 teams in college football. They still got worked in those 2 games. You hear excuse making for Vanderbilt for the way that they played against Alabama. You get excuse making for Tennessee. You get excuse making for Oklahoma, which I've even done about John Mateer's hand injury. You get excuse making for Ole Miss for the way that they played with their secondary. My point is that Miami might not be a top 3 team like I initially thought, but I think that it's fair to at least give them credit that they have been dominant in spurts, and there is room and an ability for them to bounce back and to recover and to eventually establish consistency and still win the ACC and still get to the college football playoff.
Are they dynamic at receiver without Malachi Toney?
I think that CJ Daniels is a very good receiver. I don't know if I would classify them as dynamic without Toney, but they have Toney. Plenty of teams that don't have one good receiver that are in the top 15.
Like whom?
The AP, like BYU. Vanderbilt, they've got better receivers than Vanderbilt.
You said of the AP poll.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah.
Why are we willing to give grace to other teams but we can't give it to Miami? That's my argument.
Who do we give grace to?
I think there's been a lot of grace.
You have Miami at 8. I have them at 7. Of the teams that are above them that lost, who do we give grace to? Because I remember vividly coming in here and people in the comments saying that Georgia can't beat Bama. I don't think grace has been given to Georgia at all.
This is kind of part of my conversation point. My talking point here is, and this is actually probably far more applicable because we gave grace to Georgia. We've given grace to Georgia. We've literally pointed out, like, hey, look, Georgia played a bad game against Alabama. They have issues, but there's an opportunity for them to rebound.
You know why we gave them grace? Because it's Bama that they played, not Louisville.
I can't completely counter that.
I mean, if we're going to be honest, one played Bama, the other played Louisville. One's got a third of the NIL budget than Miami. Louisville's got a third of the NIL budget. Dude, all right, listen to everybody that's in the comments. Joe and I come out here to argue, to have fun. All right, here's the truth about Miami that we're a little serious on this one. Joe, I do think that they have a problem in the interior of their offensive line. Legitimately speaking, I do think that they have a problem because they kept running dives. They got zero push. Regardless if you want to talk about the box, then if you can't separate, then that means you're not dynamic without Toney to get things moving. You're talking about an 0-4 Florida State team in the ACC. I get it. I understand what Florida State is, but the one team that can challenge you and actually coaching-wise could challenge you, Joe, they got beat from a coaching perspective too, and they got popped in the mouth. I do think they got an interior offensive line problem. I think their tackles are elite. But there's something about what's happening at center that I think teams that it looks like to me that people are trying to attack with Brock Meyer.
I don't disagree that the O-line needs to be better because they haven't played well over the last couple of games. But my whole point with all this is that there's redeemability because the way that they've played in other matchups against teams with good defensive lines, when they played Notre Dame, when they played Florida, they have shown an ability to establish a rhythm. They need to get back to that. That's my point, is that they've had challenging games, and I don't want anyone to sit here and just go, Florida sucks. We have talked up and we have said, and also we can't use Florida as a tough challenge for teams when we talk about SEC teams. When we can't remove that from the Miami conversation, because Florida does have a lot of NFL talent on their defensive line and in their front seven. They are a very, very good defense that had a lot of other structural issues that led to their downfall. Here's the one thing with Miami. I don't see a reason why they would really have any problems with their offensive line for the rest of their regular season schedule, unless they had a complete absolute meltdown and Carson Beck has another absolute meltdown, which
they go up in the cold and they don't like it in the late part of their season. What's the last part of the schedule?
They go to Virginia Tech and Pitt in the final 2 weeks. And then they host Syracuse, they host NC State, and they go to SMU. This week they host Stanford.
That's some of the softest shit I've ever seen. Of all these teams in the top 12 that we just talked about, that might be the softest schedule.
Indiana.
God, that's so soft. God, that's so soft. I mean, at least Notre Dame gets a ranked Navy.
Hey, man, you respect Navy.
Let's get to picks here. Joe, let's get to week 9 picks presented by our good friends over at FanDuel. I am 17-26. Joe is 19-24. He took it to me last week. I'm going to have to find a way to get back into the good graces here. But in case it's your first time, we pick the toughest games of the week, and we do it against the spread. Joe, the first game, Oklahoma versus Ole Miss. FanDuel has it -4.5. I'm going with Ole Miss. You're going with Oklahoma.
I said this in the preview, and I am sticking by it aggressively. Ole Miss has a very poor run defense. Their defense overall has been problematic. And I also think that Oklahoma's defense at home gets an opportunity to really fluster Trinidad Chambers. This is the toughest defensive matchup that they're seeing this year. I really think that this is a statement moment for Oklahoma as they're trying to put themselves in that college football playoff mix. So I don't have faith in this Ole Miss defense. I think that is going to be the biggest driving force for them covering.
Ole Miss has a really, really bad or does a really bad job at defending the run. Oklahoma can't run the football. I think that this Ole Miss team might be a little bit better. I just don't know if I trust Oklahoma. I trust them defensively, but I don't know if I can trust Oklahoma. I would not be shocked in the slightest if Oklahoma wins. I think it's going to be a very, very close game. I think it's within 3. I could easily see Oklahoma winning this. I really don't have a pulse on this one. Alabama -12.5 versus South Carolina. Both of us going with the Tide.
I really thought about this, and part of me was considering
it's a lot.
It's a lot. It's at home. It's Cocktober. I just don't know if this ends up being close. Bama wins, but we did the deep dive. Their O-line's bad. They can't establish any consistency on either side of the football. They're a calamitous mess right now, which sucks, which is really disappointing. So I think that Alabama's going to have their way with them.
They got students going to the football facility saying, fire Mike Shula. This would be the time, though, that the team of last year in Alabama would go on the road against an opponent that might not even get to 6 wins and lose.
I mean, that would be bonkers.
Devastating.
I don't think it's going
to either. This offense for South Carolina is so bad. I don't trust it at all. The thing that worries me the most, the thing that worries me the most is Lenore Sellers. He
can keep him alive.
He can keep him alive and go complete Superman. So I'm staying away from that one too, to be personally. Vanderbilt -2.5 over Missouri. Both of us think that the Missouri Tigers are going to go into Nashville and get the win here.
Yeah, I
just realized we got Bama and Tennessee here.
Wait, say it again.
Bama -2.5 versus Tennessee.
Jesus. All right, I'm going to fix that in a second. I was trying to fix my glasses. I like Missouri for this matchup because I don't think that we have seen Vanderbilt, or more importantly, I really think that Missouri is an opportunity here to actually challenge that secondary. I really think that we have witnessed multiple times, even LSU, whose passing attack has been incredibly inconsistent, we have witnessed multiple times where there have been a lot of big plays that they've given up through the air. Much better passing attack for Missouri. I think that they're going to have a pretty solid time working and getting some pretty big chunk plays that's going to set up their offense.
I agree wholeheartedly. I think Ahmad Hardy gets moving again this week. Joe,
Michigan State is the
Michigan State. It was mine. What was the line?
-14.5 on FanDuel.
Both of us going Michigan.
Yeah, we both went Michigan.
Okay, both going Michigan State there. Michigan there over Michigan State. Washington -4.5 over versus Illinois. Both of us going with Washington.
I really like this one. This is one of my best bets of the week. I know we didn't get to do the preview because we were yelling at each other too much. The reason why I think that Washington wins this ball game and they're going to cover, they're at home. It is a tough road trip for anybody to travel to Seattle from the Midwest where they're coming from. I really think that this Illinois defense has been pretty messy and their offensive line's really bad. I know that Washington's a little bit banged up, but I do not have faith to invest in this Illinois team when they've just had so many troubles.
Throwing this out there. Both times that no, I'm going to leave it alone. Here's what I'd say. I think Jed Fish and his staff really wants this one. I'm not going to tell the reasons why, but I think if Jed Fish gets a win in this one, that there's going to be a lot of things come Monday morning, Jed Fish to Florida. And
that makes sense.
And their camp's going to start pushing it. So we'll see. We'll see. But I think the quarterback position is where I'm going to go with this one. All right. We'll see y'all again.
We had two super chats. Really quick.
Okay.
Sorry.
Let's get to the super chats. I didn't even see them. We're arguing too much. Elks, both of them, says SEC, quote, we're undefeated in hypothetical games, end quote. Well, at least they didn't get, well, never mind. I'm going to leave it alone.
I mean, this is my whole argument, though. This was my whole argument of why I was getting mad at you. Hey,
Ohio State beat Michigan. Before you start talking shit, don't think I can't come back at you. Beat Michigan.
I don't think it's a completely wrong notion to point that out.
Oklahoma again. Alex says Blake 2 weeks ago, Oregon is the most complete team. I was wrong. Blake today, how dare you have Oregon over an SEC team? The SEC bias just comes out. There's no way, in my opinion, that you can look at Oregon and Georgia and say that one team looks like right now, and the two toughest teams that they've played, that they've had struggles. That's not bias.
Your defense, you also said that before the Indiana game, so things have changed.
Yeah,
so I'll get an opinion on that one.
Well, I'll just say this. Why don't y'all start predicting games, and then when you get shit wrong, me and Joe are going to put you on blast to 1.4 million viewers. How about that?
I don't know if we need to do that.
All right. Thank you, Alex. We appreciate it, buddy. All right. We'll see y'all again on Sunday. Peace.